Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Good evening. I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Sharing the human experience.
And experience and human is really the basis of most stories, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Yep. I find that most of the stories I tell are about either one of the two things or both of those things.
True. And even if it's about astrology, it always comes back to the people who are watching the stars or...
Right. And storytelling is a thing that Kate and I are very much involved with, maybe you could say passionate about, because we think it's part of the heart of most matters and things that matter. And it can convey emotion, it can share some lessons, it can entertain, and it can stimulate folks like you and me to remember human experiences and things that matter.
And it can actually bring people to life. If you tell the stories of your loved ones who have died, you are really bringing them back to life.
And we're here with you because we're part of the Story Circle of the Capital District, which is a gathering of about 60 storytellers in upstate New York and western New England. And we meet monthly at the Colonie Library where we're doing this filming, and on another month, the even months, down in Albany. And we have an open mic up in Saratoga Springs, and we have a website, which you're going to see a lot of, but it's Story Circle at Proctor's, and there's a lot of wonderful programming and learning going on about storytelling in the Capital District.
So, Joe, have you had anything interesting that you've done with storytelling or experiences in the past month?
I missed one of the most noteworthy, but then that's the way a too busy life works. But I was at my great big Doolittle family reunion, and I got to tell a story about my ancestor to 100 of my cousins. And it's a noteworthy story about the Reverend Dr. Benjamin Doolittle, who reestablished Northfield, Massachusetts in 1717. And he went up there as a young Yale graduate and was a physician and a minister. And I first met him on the back of my grandfather's horse, sitting behind my brother, reading his gravestone in a cemetery. And the gravestone had a wonderful poem on it, and it stayed with me until I was looking at my own son in a bassinet, and I named him Benjamin. And there's a great story behind that, which I closed with, but it was the most fun I've had telling stories in a long time.
Great. Well, a fun thing that I did was I went to the National Storytelling Network's annual conference. And as part of the conference, they give out their awards. They call them oracles. And this year, Joe Doolittle won the Northeast Region Oracle for Service and Leadership.
Wow.
And I would like to present you your award.
Oh, wow!
Now.
Wow. You know, I kind of knew, I knew this was coming, folks, but it isn't every day that you get one of these. And I had that, but short of the story is I had to be at the family reunion and I couldn't be here. And Kate accepted this in my absence. And I haven't heard the story about how that worked.
Well, I presented it to you and I accepted it for you.
That's right. And it's a humbling honor because, telling stories and advocating and promoting and doing the things we do with storytelling doesn't seem like work or anything like that. It's just a privilege to be able to be part of it all. So I thank the National Storytelling, and I thank you, Kate, for carrying this heavy plaque with you all the way from Virginia. And the only thing I can say is wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, that was a showstopper for me. Anyway. So what else happened at this? This was a big gathering of storytellers?
Oh, yes. There were almost 300 of us, mostly from the United States. There were a few from Australia and from Canada. There were workshops every day. There were performances every day.
And how do you get a word in edgewise
Well,
with 300 storytellers?
Starting the keynote addresses or something, often Michael McCarty from California, have mouth will run, I believe is how he bills himself. He would go, and I'm just doing a watered down imitation of it, but much louder and deeper. And that tends to
get people's attention.
Yes. Or actually,
Head for the hills, the Indians are coming.
Well,
Yeah.
whatever. So, so it was very exciting to be with all these people, some of whom I only see once in a long time.
Right.
But there's a listserv for storytellers, and there's Facebook for storytellers, and so forth.
Now, did you go to one of the other things I missed by not being there was, did you go to Elizabeth Ellis's birthday party?
Yes.
And Elizabeth Ellis is someone who has graced our stage at Story Sundays and coached many of us. Mm-hmm. And she turned
70.
70.
On August 2nd. So while the conference was going on, so earlier in the day, Motico had conceived of a workshop about meaningful mentorship, which went into details on how Elizabeth has been a mentor to a great number of people. Mm-hmm. And I helped with the logistics of that. Good. And then Elizabeth threw herself a birthday party. And Motico and her partner, Eshu Bumpus, who has also graced our stage at Proctor's, mm-hmm. Had asked people to send in videos or material. And so that video lasted about 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And let's see, somebody brought her a tiara to wear.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Tiara?
Yes.
May not really be like the tiara type.
Well, no, she wore it all day.
Do it? Oh, okay.
And then the next day she wore it until the Oracle Awards ceremony. She received one of the 2 Lifetime Achievement Oracles for this year. The other one was Sid Lieberman.
Whoa, wow.
So for that occasion, she wore a crown.
She wore a crown. So on her 70th birthday, she got a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Actually, it was the next day.
And she threw her own party and had a 25-minute kind of video of people saying nice things about her.
Yes.
I don't think it gets much better than that. Really don't. I think we have a video or a clip of Elizabeth on our website, don't we? From one of her shows here, or don't?
Not from here, but from other places. She is available on YouTube.
Yeah, and she has this wonderful approach to the life she's lived, and it hasn't always been smooth, but she's made great learning and stories out of some of the bumps in the road, mm-hmm. and it's just wonderful.
And even about schmoozing on Valentine's Day at Walmart's in front of the collection of roses for sale.
Now that would be a story. I might have to check that out come next February 14th. I'll tell you, that's a. Yeah. I'd probably be there anyway in panic haste because I forgot a gift for Gay anyway. Oh.
Well, there were many. That was the theme of men rushing in and going, "Oh, no more red roses," and she counseled them as to red is sort of mundane and
And white would be a nice color. Right?
White would be a nice color. One man moved to Texas because that's where his wife was from, and she said, "So she's your yellow rose of Texas."
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
So anyways, she's a wonderful storyteller, a wonderful mentor, and everyone was very glad that she got her time
Yeah.
to celebrate. But we have another reason to celebrate today.
We do.
We have our wonderful guest with us,
we
who has never
do.
been in this studio
She's
before.
not been in the studio,
We've
but-
taped her before, but not in this studio, as I recall.
We have a wonderful presence. You know, storytelling is sometimes just the presence of introducing your story and letting it flow through a room and into the minds and hearts of people. And Nancy Payne has had that experience. And you know, her email address is NP Mountaintop. Not anymore?
You're close.
Oh,
NP,
well,
Nancy Marie Payne.
Nancy Marie Payne Mountaintop, because she lives on the top of the mountains in the Helderbergs. And she's very proud of the fact that she's kind of a mountain person. And I'm proud that I know somebody that lives that high up in the air.
But tethered to the ground.
Tethered to the ground. And Nancy is with us, and welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
You're here in your role, many varied role as a storyteller and as a coach of children at the Well, as a writer. And you've had a career in outdoor education and a number of things that are allowed the storytelling aspects of your life to kind of get into focus. And we're so pleased to have you here today.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you, Joe.
Well, and you know, the other thing I remember about Nancy is that she was like from Oswego, New York, and that's the place that gets so much snow that every time I look at her kind of sitting here on a summer afternoon, I somehow I have to think snow, and that's not fair.
Well, it's true of Bern also. I mean, it
That's-
is a different climate zone.
That is,
Even
that
though it
is.
is nearby.
Spring happens a little later up at the top of the hill.
I experience spring when I come down here, and then I experience a little bit longer when I go home. So,
I see.
yes.
I see.
So it's a longer season
Much,
for you.
much longer, yes.
That's a wonderful way of looking at it.
Well, so if you have coffee in Averill Park or in Altamont, then you have another opportunity for having a spring cup of coffee a week later at home. That's one way of kind of making a good
Yes.
thing out of an extended winter, I think. But that's, and we should do that. Coffee is a great attribute.
So,
Go ahead.
yes, so Nancy, why are you a storyteller?
Oh, man. Why am I a storyteller? I don't think I can be anything else. I've been telling stories, not professionally, but I've been telling stories. Well, I had a younger sister. And the older sister can't not know the answer. So I started making up these answers to her fantastic questions, and it just grew from there.
And you marred her for life?
Definitely, definitely,
Marked her,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Well, at least she didn't hit her.
No, I've
No.
seen them together, and they seem, at least in public,
Rather normal?
or friendly.
Friendly,
Yeah,
oh.
so that's good.
Yes.
So you,
Despite your experimentation on her mind.
did you have other storytellers in your life as a kid? Did you have did your folks tell you stories? Did you have an uncle?
You know, I never saw it as stories. I do have family stories, and obviously someone told them to me, but they didn't tell them as a story. Mostly I remember my father or my mother reading to me. So that was my early experience with Brer Rabbit and all of the classics. But I didn't know storytelling was a thing until I became an adult. I was using stories in my classroom to, children do not want to hear, take out your history book.
Right.
But if you say, well, I got a story about, and then tell them a story, that's not history, that's the teacher wasting time. And so I learned to waste time with the things that they needed to know, and that went across. So I was telling stories my whole life, I just didn't know I was a storyteller.
But you've fallen, one of your interests is the late 1800s and early 1900s. And I know we're about the same age, so we weren't alive then.
No, no.
So
Both of you guys are 92? I'm sorry.
you're older.
Okay.
92. Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're well
I won't go
preserved.
there anymore.
Yeah.
You're
Yes,
well
yeah,
preserved. No, I find that era fascinating. So much is happening then. The Civil War, women's rights, the temperance movement, spiritualism, all of these things are happening. And so by concentrating in one era, I can use my experience from one story and use it as background in another story. And I extended my era into the early 1900s when I was asked to do women's aviation. And so okay, we'll go into the 1900s. But all of these things are connected. No one person is doing, I'm just involved in temperance. They are involved in emancipation, in women's rights. It's all mixed together. So it's a wonderful era. And I discovered it through the orphan trains. BBC had a it wasn't documentary, what do they call those?
Docudrama?
Docudrama, yes. On the orphan trains coming out of New York City starting in the 1850s. Now, I minored in history and United States history. I think I know my New York State history and my United States history pretty well. I knew nothing about this. And so I started to research it and found out, oh, wow, this is an exciting era in the American history. And that's where I really got into storytelling, because I wanted this to be known. I wanted this to be out there.
I'm a little bit taken aback because when you mentioned that, and I was a history major in college, and I'm afraid I don't really know.
You're in the majority there, because almost every audience I go to, 90% of them or more, I've never heard of this. And it went on for 75 years.
75 years. And well, I have one of the things that stories do is they can generate some memories. And I have a story about my grandmother being put on a train in Boston. But that's another story. Now, the organizations of this kind of infrastructure, but you've actually gotten kind of caught by the story.
Very much so, yes.
Yes,
very much so. And many stories have come out of it, yes.
And so that you've got this harvest of stories, and how you tell these stories?
Yes. In fact, I think she could tell us
You think
one
she
of
could?
them right now.
Well, why don't we listen to it? Then maybe we'll know more about this whole thing of the orphan trains.
Yes.
So.
Well, it's only going to be a part of the first chapter, because you don't have an hour and a half here.
The first chapter
The
of what?
first well, I actually, with the help of an editor, put it into book form.
Oh, really?
I've been telling this story for 12 years now, and it grows with each telling. And I hired an editor and an artist, and we've put it into book form now. And so it's the title, if you can't read that, is How I Came to Dowagiac, because Dowagiac, Michigan was the first town that the orphan trains left New York City to be taken to.
Dowagiac,
Michigan, yes. It's in the southwestern corner of Michigan.
Wow.
And the gentleman, Reverend Charles Loring Brace, was a minister in New York City, and he wasn't having much luck in his ministry, but he saw the need to get the children out of the atmosphere. He had an orphanage called the Children's Aid Society. It wasn't really an orphanage when he started it, but it has since become one. And his plan was to get them out of there. They didn't have parents, or if they did, the parents weren't part of the children's lives, and get them into a different atmosphere. And also, people out west were looking for help. Farmers needed help in their fields, women needed help with their children. And so this was his way to solve these problems. Of course, all the stories do not have happy endings. But he started this movement. And farming out, as it was called, that's old, that's ancient. That goes back to ancient Egypt, where the people would give children to other people. The Celts did it, gave their children, the rich royalty in the Celts gave their children to someone else to bring up, but they didn't lose possession of them as they did in this situation. So it's an ancient practice. But Reverend Brace put a new hitch on it. He put them on trains, and he also sent agents to the cities, to the towns where these children would be going, And people would sign contracts to take these children until they were 21. And then they made certain promises what they would do when they let the children go. And then he would send agents every year to check on all of the charges. Over 2,000 children were sent out of New York alone in that mode. Other orphanages picked up the practice after Brace, and he was in the 1850s. And as I said, it continued in 1929.
Wow.
So this was a long, long time where children were relocated.
Wow.
Not all of them were orphans, but so there were some bad stories, some bad things. But in my book, I concentrate on the first event, and I try to look on the positive side of it, because I'm looking to young readers.
Why don't you tell us the first chapter?
The first part of the first chapter, I'll be very happy to. The book is told in the first person, and so if you will imagine going back to the 1800s, where all of the modern conveniences we have today are not there, communication is not there, and life is slower and a lot more simple, and in some cases not quite as nice as we have it today. My name is Elsie Dowdle, and in 1854 I came to Dowagiac, Michigan to find a new family. Before that, I lived in New York City with my parents, my father and my mother. We lived in a nice building, an apartment. I had my own bedroom. I had 3 meals a day. I had a bed to sleep in. I thought everybody had those things. I had a lot to learn that year I was 10 years old. We lived in a 3-story building. My father was in charge of it. He was the custodian. He made sure that the windows were clean and the steps were swept. He shoveled the snow in the winter. He made repairs. So he was around all day long. At night, he wrote stories for magazines and newspapers. He sold them. My father was the most honest person I knew. He never told the owner of the building that he did something that he hadn't done. And when he counted his words to sell his stories, he counted them 2 and 3 times so that he would not charge more than he was producing. My mother, she kept pigeons up on the roof. And she fed those pigeons and she raised them, and then she would sell them to butchers or to restaurants. And they would buy them, and that increased our income. I didn't know much about that then, but I knew that I had a pretty good life. Mom would use those pigeons for us on the holidays. We'd have roast squab. That's really cooked chicken, or cooked pigeon, I mean. She served them with turnips and baked potatoes. She taught me how to sew and to cook and to read music. I had a good life. But there's one thing my parents did not know about me, and that is, whenever I would leave the house, my mother would give me an apple or a piece of cheese or a hunk of bread to take with me to nibble on. I gave those things away a lot of the time. You see, when I got to the street, I would meet this girl. She was about my age, a little shorter than myself. We both had blonde hair. My mother said the color of my hair was a dirty blonde. Hers was really dirty. Her clothes weren't as nice as mine. They weren't as clean as mine. I knew she was a beggar, but I didn't really know what that meant. I thought she just begged and then went home at night. She called me Missy. She'd say, "Thank you, Missy," when I'd give her what I had in my pocket, and then I wouldn't see her for a few days. Well, this one particular day, I left the house with something in my pocket that I gave to Meg, and I went about my business. New York City. You're always smelling smoke in New York City. Everything's made of wood. Well, not everything, but most of the things. And people use wood to cook their meals or to keep their houses warm. There were fires, lots of fires. And it was exciting when the wagons would come down the street being pulled by the firemen. Dogs would chase them, children would chase them, and people would be yelling and screaming, and oh, it was very exciting. But you know, I was 10 by then, and if the wagon didn't come right down my street, I wasn't really that interested in chasing it anymore. So this day, when I heard the wagons, they were about a block off. I didn't chase them. When I got home to my neighborhood, the smell of smoke was heavy in the air. When I got to my street, my house was gone. How do you leave a 3-story building in the morning and come home later to ashes and rubble? I looked around trying to find my parents. There were people on the street. Some of them had blankets on, and some of them were holding each other, and I just couldn't find my parents. So I thought I'd look for a constable or maybe a fireman. And I looked around, and there was a group of firemen standing there, so I went over to them. But it was odd because it was like the firemen were hiding one of their own. And I realized he was crying. A grown man was crying. Never in my life seen or heard of a grown man crying. And the other firemen were hiding him like they were ashamed of him. But I could hear him say, I couldn't get to them. I just couldn't get to them. And deep down inside me, I knew he was talking about my parents. I sat down on the curb and I felt water on my hand, and I looked down and I was crying, just like that fireman. And I was watching the people go by and hoping, and then there was a hand on my shoulder, and a little voice said, "Come on, Missy, crying never did nobody no good nohow." And Meg was right there beside me. She lifted me by the arm, and she took my hand and she led me away. I just followed her. I did look back once, but she yanked me and said, "Come on, let's go." I didn't know where we were going, and to tell you the truth, I didn't really care. Someone else was in charge, and I was willing to follow her. She took me to places that I'd never been, and then she turned down an alleyway. Now, there's one thing you ought to know about me. When I get scared or nervous, I get the hiccups. Not like you get the hiccups, but they start down deep in my belly and they come up my throat, and I just can't stop hiccuping. Well, there were 3 boys in that alley, just standing there with their arms crossed, blocking our way, and I saw them, and I stopped, and I pulled my hand away from Meg, and the hiccups started. And Meg turned around and looked at me like, "What's the matter with you?" And I couldn't talk with those hiccups. I just pointed to those boys. And Meg turned around and she looked at them and she went, she walked down to one of them and slapped him on the arm and said, "Get out of the way. This is my friend and you leave her alone." I was so startled, I guess I stopped breathing funny, and my hiccup stopped. You know, when you first meet somebody, you think one thing about them, but after you get to know them, you think another thing. I used to think that Meg was timid and shy and bashful and quiet. I had just found out she was in charge. She was a strong person. And she was going to be my salvation now that I was starting to live on the streets of New York City.
Wow.
What comes next? What comes next?
They live on the street for a while. They have their adventures. It's all new to poor Elsie. She doesn't know what to make of it. She's still got her honesty and her cleanliness, and they don't fit into this new way of life. They do end up in the Children's Aid Society that I was speaking about, and they become the first group, the first group. They were part of the first group that the Reverend sent west. And so a whole new set of adventures, which is why there's a train on the cover. And she ends up in Dowagiac, Michigan. I'm not telling you anymore because that would spoil the story.
All right. But she is a fictional character
She
that
is
you
fictional.
said in actual history.
Yes, Elsie is fictional, but Meg was a real person, and many of the other characters that are on the train, well, of course, the Reverend is an actual person. The two gentlemen that are in charge of them on this trip, they actually were those men, and it was through one of their letters that I got as much as I did about this first group and the names of some of the children and where they ended up.
So the letter was, who wrote?
One of the gentlemen, Reverend Mr. Smith, sent the letter back to Reverend Brace. And this is about all that's left from this first trip. There wasn't much documentation on this. And this is one of the things that I like as a storyteller. I can take these unknown characters, these little people. Elsie is really a composite of many of the children that I read about. And the incident is true, the trip is real, the Children's Aid Society is real. But because this is the first one with not much written, I have leeway to create my characters, to put incidents in there that might have happened on another trip, but I can put it into this first one in my historical fiction. And there's also a CD, so if anyone doesn't want to read it, but rather listen to it, there's a CD of the same story.
Wow.
Excellent.
Now, I'm curious, when you read the letter, you met Meg for the first time.
Just her name.
Just her name.
Just her name. There was nothing about her other than it listed some of, Meg went to, Duke went to,
Yeah.
not a lot, no background. But I do know that most of the children in the Children's Aid Society were, in those days, all of the children came off the street. So I created Meg's backstory also.
And the year again for that train ride was
1854.
1854.
And any of the historians out there might know that there were no trains out of New York City going west in 1854. So this first group actually got on a boat and rode up to Albany. And from Albany, they took the train west. So there's an Albany connection in the story,
So they
too. And that too is fact.
So they took the overnight boat up to Albany. That was
Yes.
the day boat.
Yes,
The day boat,
the
the
day
overnight
boat.
boat.
Oh, okay.
It was the Isaac Newton.
Wow.
Because in my recent research on the artist Winslow Homer, he took the night boat up to Albany, and then a train to Saratoga, and then a stagecoach to Chestertown,
yeah.
and then
Horse-
horses or something, wagons to Minerva,
Yeah,
where
Wow.
he was fishing
Minerva.
and sketching and painting.
nice.
So
Yes, there was no hop on a plane and go to Dowagiac. But, steps along the way.
Wow. You know, this is a great bit of work. I mean, I'm sure it took a great bit of time, too, but I mean, it's a great bit of work because the period you described was on the cusp of so much. The fact that there was a steamboat in the river, that there were trains that were, 30 years old in terms of things, and just the timing of it. And it's 6 years before the Civil War, and that part of Michigan had really only been settled
Yes,
probably for
it was the
25 years. It was really
the frontier.
still pretty rough.
right, the Erie Canal opened up settlement in Michigan.
Right.
And
In Ohio, and yes.
oh, man. Now, I can't even say the name of that. Is that
Dowagiac.
Dowagiac? That's a real place.
That's a real place, yes.
Still there.
Still there. And one of the things that they produce in Dowagiac, they have fruit farms. And that's where one of the highlights of the story, the fruits.
Are you going out to Dowagiac to tell the story?
Wouldn't that be nice? If anyone's watching from Dowagiac, Michigan, I'm available.
Or you know anyone who is, well,
we might try to orchestrate that. It's too good a story not to try. You know?
but we have to go on to what is happening here in the near future.
Yes.
Oh,
Because we only have 24 minutes left. Time
wow!
is just
Wow!
flying.
Well, and we're this is you're seeing this show in September.
Yes.
And September is the start of the Story Circle at Proctor's season. Maybe, yeah. October.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
well, we aren't going to Dowagiac, I'll tell you that much.
Okay. I'll go through some things, and Nancy mentioned she had some events she wanted to mention. The end of the Not Just for Kids storytelling series over at Fort Hunter is on September 8th with yours truly telling stories of women who made a difference. True stories about American women.
And I have to encourage you, not only is Kate a great storyteller and a wonderful friend, but the storytelling series at Schoharie Crossing is just a great enterprise. And if you haven't been there, then please put it on your list. And this will be the last program for this summer season. It's just off Route 5, about 3 miles west of Amsterdam. And it's just a tucked away gem. And so please put that on your calendar, 6 o'clock on the 9th.
On the 8th.
8th, Sunday.
Okay. And another event that's happening is I don't know what the right word is, but the every other year Saratoga Native American Festival up at SPAC on the last weekend in September, September 28th and 29th, run by our good friends, the Bruchaks, who have been on our show several times.
And it's a biennial, which is every 2 years.
Okay.
And it's really one of the most effective ways of kind of connecting with many of the stories and crafts and music of Native American people. And Joe and his family orchestrate this very well. And we encourage you to take that. What's the date on that again?
The 28th and the 29th of September, traditional dancing, storytelling, music, native arts, crafts and jewelry, cultural demonstrations, children's activity tent, native vendors, and food.
And food.
And so SaratogaNativeFestival.com has more information, as you can see on the slides. And then I did put in a slide about our first program, our first word plays at Proctor's in our 7th season, Life and Death, because Nancy Marie Payne is one of our tellers then. That's Sunday, October 20th. But this is the September show, so you'll be seeing this again in October. But Nancy, you said you had some events.
Well, I just want to mention that on December 15th, I'll be down at the Albany Institute of History and Art. And they have a beautiful Egyptian exhibit down there that will be highlighted during that time. And I'll be telling stories in the Egyptian room at 1 o'clock and at 3 o'clock. So if they're in that area and want to check out that museum.
You'll be telling stories to the mummy?
And the daddies.
Oh,
and the little bitty children, too.
I missed a lot of that, fortunately. But you know what, the date again on that? The 15th?
December 15th, yes.
Yes.
The exhibit is going on all season.
All fall.
All fall, yeah.
All right, great.
I'll be there on the 15th.
And then we also wanted to mention once again our YouTube channel. You can get to it go to storycircleatproctors.org and click on YouTube, and you will see stories that have been cut out of previous programs and a few other places where we've taped things. So if your friends say, you like storytelling for adults? What the heck is that? If you would, please be our ambassadors and send them to our website so that they too can go,
Oh, really?
this is way cool. I didn't know that, it's like theater. Yeah, storytelling was the first form of theater.
And if you're looking to tell people about, that wonderful storyteller Nancy Payne, probably by the middle of September, we'll have this show, those snippets of Nancy telling that part of the opening chapter up on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
Do you have another story?
I do.
We have 19 minutes left.
19 minutes, so I won't use all of it.
Okay.
All right.
But I think that's a nice, comfortable
Thank you.
time period.
Thank you. My ma gave me a nickel to buy a pickle. I didn't buy a pickle. I bought some chewing gum. All my life, I've been a gum chewer. And I got it from my family. Each member of my family had their own specialty, their own gum. For instance, my mother's gum was Dentine. Now, nowadays, you can go to the store and you can buy Dentine in different flavors. Not back when I was a kid. It came in one flavor, and that's the only flavor, the only gum that she would give me. You had to unwrap it, and you only got this little piece, and you got one piece a day because it was good for your teeth. But my grandmother, in her purse were chiclets. Now chiclets are small pieces too, but they're not individually wrapped. And chiclets were a reward. Graham, can I have, it might be something in the house. I wasn't asking her to buy me something, but can I play with maybe one of the knickknacks on her shelf? Yes, you can if you're gentle, and if you handle it gently, I'll give you a chiclet. Well, of course I was going to handle it gently, but also, Nancy Marie, have you made your bed this morning? Not yet, Graham. Well, there's a chiclet in it for you if you do. Well, that bed was made in no time. Yeah, Graham knew how to control her children, her grandchildren, with chiclets. And she never gave you just one, but you got the second one when you did the second thing. My father, now he didn't carry gum in his pocket, but you'd be in a store and you'd go, "Hey, Dad, they sell double bubble gum here." Well, he'd buy 2 pieces, one for you and one for him. No, didn't have to do anything to earn it. And we'd unwrap them together, and we'd read the little cartoon about Bazooka Joe. "Hey, Bazooka Joe, where do you find a 400-pound monkey?" Any place he wants to be. We would laugh. My father and I would laugh. And then we'd have contests. We'd hold that gum until he'd say, "Go." We'd throw it in our mouth, and we'd chew, and the first one to make a bubble was the winner. Yeah, Dad and double bubble. Wow. Those are good memories. To chewing gum, to chewing gum. I didn't buy a pickle, I bought some chewing gum. Not all adults appreciated chewing gum when I was a kid. And one of that class of adults that really did not appreciate chewing gum at all were teachers. Now, I was the type of kid that if someone said to me, "You can't," well, that was like throwing down the gauntlet. That was a challenge. So when the teachers would say, "You may not chew gum in my class," I had to try it. And I was very good at it. I knew how to unwrap that under my desk so that the paper didn't crinkle. And then I waited until the teacher's back was turned. I'd pop it in. And I'd take a few beginning chews. But the teacher would look at us, and I'd be there, all attention, until she turned around again. And I would chew some more. I could get away with it until we do math. Math made you think. And your mouth wasn't paying attention. And it would start to chew while you're doing that problem. Get caught every time. And teachers weren't fair. They didn't just say, "Throw away that piece." They'd say, "Throw away that piece and give me the rest of them." No. Teachers just didn't understand about chewing gum. My mom gave me a quarter to tip the porter. I didn't tip the porter. I bought some chewing gum. Chewing gum had its own culture, its own songs, like, "Does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight?" And when your mother says, "Don't chew it, do you swallow it in spite?" Oh, that was a good song. We liked that one. Or there was "Double your pleasure, double your fun, double good, double mint gum." Oh yeah, it was a commercial, but we sang it anyways. In those commercials, in the beginning, there was just one double mint commercial with 2 girls ice skating, dressed exactly the same. They were twins. And they did the same movement at the same time, and they were pretty cool. Well, under our Christmas tree, there was a village that my mother had made all of the houses for. She'd made them out of ceramic, she'd painted them, she decorated them. She was very talented. She even took a Christmas card that had a clear cellophane on it, and she cut that out and made it the window of the church in the village. Every year she would go down to Woolworth's, the 5 and 10, and she would buy these little iron figures to decorate the village. One year she bought a girl on ice skates with her arms out and her leg back. And a couple years later, she bought the identical same one. So we had two. And my sister and I called them the Double Mint twins. Every Christmas, when we'd put that village under the tree, we'd each take a Double Mint girl. One of us would run to the bathroom to get a mirror to put down for the ice skating rink. We'd get cotton and put it all around it. And then each of us would hold our twin and we'd sing that song at the top of our lungs for anyone within the whole apartment complex to hear. And then we'd put them on the ice. After my mother's passing, my sister and I were divvying up all the things in the house. She took some of the Christmas village, I took some of the Christmas village. And then when we got to those Double Mint girls, you want to take them? No, you take them. Well, we each took one. And so every year I know that when I put my village under the tree and I sing my Double Mint song, that in North Carolina, my sister and her family are doing the same thing. Choo-choo, chewing gum, choo-choo, chewing gum. I didn't tip the porter, I bought some chewing gum. I still chew gum. And I was fortunate enough to marry a man who indulged me in that. Whenever we would stop on the thruway or go through a store that had a bubble gum machine, he would hand me a quarter. I had my own money, but he would hand me a quarter and say, go ahead, you're going to get a red one. And you know, I'd put that quarter in and I'd get a red one. The man was psychic. He'd give me another quarter and say, I want a white one. And he'd put the money in and a white one would come down that chute and there we'd go. Well, there was a restaurant, there still is, if you live in the Buffalo area, the Royal Restaurant on the corner of Military and Sheridan. He took me in there once, and they had the most amazing bubblegum machine. It was about 6 feet high. There was a half-foot reservoir of bubblegum balls on the top. It was 3 feet wide and 2 feet deep. It was amazing. You put your money in, and 2 balls dropped out of that reservoir. And they went all through these antics, and music would play, dun 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 dun, and bells would ring, and lights would come on, and things would flash, and things would twirl, and these balls would be spun, and thrown, and caught, and wretched up, and thrown down. Came down in a parachute at one point, and they would race to the bottom. And he would always call the color that would hit the bottom first. That was about 30 seconds of this wildness. Once, both balls hit that end at the same time, we got 2 for the price of 1. My mom gave me $1 to stand up and holler. I didn't stand and holler, I bought some chewing gum. You know, this should be the end of the story, but it's not. Because a couple years ago, my sister-in-law took me back to that same restaurant in the same place, the corner of Military and Sheridan, and we went into the Royal Restaurant, and the machine wasn't there. My sister-in-law got upset. We went and sat down, and we looked at the menus, and the waiter came over and said, "What can I do for you?" And my sister-in-law said, "Put the bubblegum machine back." The poor man, he was probably new there. He had no idea what she was talking about. And he said, well, my sister-in-law here wrote a story about that bubblegum machine, and we came to see it, and it's not there. Excuse me, I'll get the manager. The manager came, and Donna, it's okay, Donnie, it's all right. No, it's not all right. You wrote a story about that bubblegum machine, and they should put it back. So that's the end of the story. Choo-choo, chewing gum, choo-choo, chewing gum. I didn't stand and holler. I bought some chewing gum.
Oh, love it, love it, love it.
You'll never guess what my son's favorite diner is in Buffalo.
The Royal?
The Royal, and he bought a house off of Military.
Yes.
Almost to 290 Ensminger.
Oh my goodness.
Before you get to Tim Hortons.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Whoa! There it goes. Small world time.
Ooh, yes.
Well, he can start the lobbying effort to
Yes.
get them a bubblegum machine
I'll give
back
him
at the
Donna's
Royal.
name. They can, two of them can
Well,
pick it.
I mean, he had a problem because he always wanted to have a waffle there, but he was never there at waffle time.
Oh,
That he tended to go there after a late night role-playing game, so he might be there at like 3 in the morning, and there wasn't waffle time
Oh.
yet. And once he got off, he said, "I'll pay double," and they said, "No, it wasn't waffle time."
oh.
So, but finally, the last time we were in Buffalo, we were actually going to have breakfast at waffle time.
Oh.
So we went to the Royal and he finally had a waffle at the Royal.
Ambition fulfilled. Wonderful.
Yes, but I didn't know anything about the bubblegum
Yeah,
machine,
no,
so-
that was back in the 90s. They had the
Okay, so
machine.
that was before he went to college
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But I digress. That was, well, clearly we've
Well,
shown how stories can
yes.
Generate other stories.
and,
I'll
and,
tell you,
and
just like that.
memories, and,
Wow.
and of course the Christmas village
Oh,
and the
yes.
traditions, and then the breaking up after the parents are gone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that all resonated.
yes.
And, and stories of being a grandparent and gum for a granddaughter. I have a story about gum,
Gum.
and granddaughter.
Yes.
Yeah, they're it's a wonderful medium to
Yes.
work in. Yes.
Yes.
Gum.
Gum.
Now, the harvesting of that story was your own life.
Yes. Yes, they're all true.
So if we were to ask you where do you get your stories, a lot of them come from your own experience.
And a lot of the stories that I love to tell are stories that go back to when my parents read to me. And the story I tell now is not the same story that they read, but it has fermented over the years and become part of my repertoire.
Yeah, that's quite true. That's quite true. I generated one little thought. My son Ben was getting interested in the Revolutionary War, and he asked for a book. So I went over to the library, or my library. I took down a book by Kenneth Roberts, which was published in the 30s, Rabble in Arms. I said, "This is," and I've gotten a lot of material from Kenneth Roberts over the years. And he emailed me, said he was enjoying it, and he wanted to add his name to the book. And I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, it's signed Fred Doolittle, and then Alden H. Doolittle, and you wrote in it, but they both dated it. One's dated 33, one's dated 37. What date did you read the book?" And I had forgotten all about that experience and about finding the two other names in the book and writing my own after I was regifted it when my aunt was giving up her house. So there are many echoes to those
Yes.
books in the family,
Yes.
reading in the family.
But you have another of your many branch storytelling tree, where you collaborated with a local author,
yes.
Using an ancient form of story.
Fable.
Fable.
Fable, yes. The author's name that I collaborated with is Norman Cohen. He lives in Delmar, and he wrote a book of modern fables. And we were put together, he and I linked together by a fellow writer, and we just hit it off together, and he said, "I want you to tell my stories." And so he and I go to nursing homes or whoever will hire us, and I tell his stories. His book is called Fables by John Ball, and John Ball is one of his pen names. There's a whole story to that too. But I just have some of his stories and on my CD, The Finicky Frog. And all of this information, his website and mine, are on, and how to get my books, are on the website, which they're going to share with you today too.
NancyMariePayne.blogspot.com.
Yes, thank you.
And that's the place you could get the book and the CD and the CD of the book.
And a list of all the other stories that I can tell.
Right. Oh, not a picture of you as Pancho What's her name in the leather jacket?
No, I don't have that one. Pancho Barnes
Yes.
was one of the pioneer women aviators, and she was a very colorful person. And so when I tell Pancho's story, I have to behave myself. But she wore men's pants back in the 19 teens, and smoked cigars, and was out to shock. But she also made some records in flight and in women's flight. So yes, Pancho. No, I don't have a picture of myself as Pancho.
Wow. The one other little element to underline is that Nancy mentioned about performances. And in addition to the productions that we've promoted, that we are producing, we encourage you to think about using a storyteller around a particular topic or a program in your own service club, church, because on our website, Story Circle at Proctor's, in addition .org, in addition to Nancy Payne, in addition to the YouTube of stories, are bios and background on over 30 storytellers who are available to come out and share their stories. And in effect, the YouTube is a little bit of an audition for most of them. So it's all there for you. And we encourage you to help spread the word by, God forbid, hiring a storyteller.
No, we're ready, willing, and able.
Now, while I'm making the pitch about the vegetable slicers, we're also
1995.
But wait.
we are also a not-for-profit organization. We are affiliated with Proctor's, and if you want to send a check to Proctor's and memo it to Story Circle, it'll help us support the production work and the storytelling programs that we offer to the public, and we'll appreciate that, and we'll acknowledge it profusely. We might even invite you to be a patron of the air here sometime. No.
Joe's the more spontaneous one in this group, though I did spontaneously deliver that to you.
You did, and I must say that I cherish the award and the delivery, and the
nomination,
and all that goes with it, and all that kind of goes along with storytelling too. We have another little line that we have used because we've been doing this a long time together. And we usually say, "Well, we're married, but to other people."
His wife is gay, but he's not.
There we go.
That's her name.
And Jerry is just Jerry.
Yes.
Enough of this frivolity. Do we have a little goodbye story?
Do we have a little goodbye story?
Do you?
I have a goodbye joke.
Okay.
Do you know what you call a bear with no teeth?
A bear with no teeth. I'm afraid to ask you.
It even fits. I can't believe it. This is my joke of the month, but a gummy bear.
The term benediction literally means a good word at the end. If you watch this show next month, we might have a good word.
What's this date?
That wasn't it. That wasn't it. But it was a good joke, and I have to commend my partner for keeping the standard as wherever it is. Where the joke.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you'll come back again, story by story.
Love to hear and see stories with you.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round.